Good morning, everyone. It's good to see you all here today and on this beautiful autumn day. Well, last week we were talking about the Vimalakirti Sutra. It's a story about the lay practitioner Vimalakirti. And this story is highly imaginative and fanciful. It's clearly a fictional account. It signals that in very obvious ways by having 32,000 perfectly perfected bodhisattvas in this mango grove with the Buddha, along with thousands of other human and non-human beings. So just a brief aside, I think my opinion is that in modern life we have somehow lost something of the ability to understand scriptural texts because of a certain poverty of the imagination. These texts live because they have meaning, but they don't have to have literal meaning. In fact, literalism kind of starves the air out of them, so that you end up being concerned about whether a burning bush can really talk, rather than appreciating the sudden and immense transformation of the character Moses. So I think this sutra is intended to stimulate, to arouse the imagination, and to break down barriers, to break down the usual bounds of our mind. So while the Buddha is in this mango grove, Vimalakirti is in a 10 by 10 foot sick room in his mansion, suffering from a illness that he induced in order to attract well-wishers, so that he could, with the aid of the Buddha and in collaboration with the Buddha, give greater depth to the Buddha's teaching, and to use these interactions as teaching moments. So in the third chapter that we're starting now, it starts off recognizing this collaboration between the Buddha and Vimalakirti. I'll read sections of it because I think this, the writing is just so wonderful. It's clearly intended to be read rather than memorized and recited. It's that kind of text. At that time, the rich man Vimalakirti thought to himself, I am lying here sick in bed. Why does the world honored one, in his great compassion, fail to show some concern for me? The Buddha, aware of this thought, they communicate telepathically, said to Shariputra. Shariputra was one of the Buddha's earliest and most ardent disciples. The Buddha, aware of this thought, said to Shariputra, "You must go to visit Vimalakirti and inquire about his illness." But Shariputra replied to the Buddha in these words, "World-honored one, I am not competent to visit him and inquire about his illness. Why? Because I recall one occasion in the past when I was sitting in quiet meditation under a tree in the forest. At that time, Vimalakirti approached and said to me, 'Ah, Shariputra, you should not assume that this sort of sitting is true quiet sitting. Quiet sitting means that in this threefold world you manifest neither body nor will. This is quiet sitting. Not rising out of your samadhi of complete cessation, and yet showing yourself in the ceremonies of daily life. This is quiet sitting. Not abandoning the principles of the way, and yet showing yourself in the activities of a common mortal. This is quiet sitting. Your mind not fixed on internal things, and yet not engaged with externals either. This is quiet sitting. Unmoved by sundry theories, but practicing the 37 elements of the way. This is quiet sitting. Entering nirvana without having put an end to earthly desires. This is quiet sitting. If you can do this kind of sitting, you will merit the Buddha's seal of approval. At this time, world-honored one, when I heard him speak these words, I remained silent, for I had no way to reply to them. This is why I am not competent to visit him and inquire about his illness. In other translations, the disciples, including Shariputra, instead of pleading incompetence to talk to Vimalakirti, say that they are reluctant to talk to him, or they are unenthused about talking to him because of the experience that they've had with him in the past. So this interaction, and I think it's clearly fanciful, but this interaction points to an evolution in Buddhism from the early teachings to the later teachings of the Buddha. And a societal evolution where the Buddha's followers were primarily monastics, home leavers, people who wore robes and followed the Buddha from place to place. To a tradition as Buddhism spread, where it became more generalized among the laity and more practiced by laity. And associated with that evolution was the evolution from the archetype of the Arhat, the person primarily interested in self-perfection in order to achieve enlightenment, to the archetype of the Bodhisattva, who was interested in, as they say, saving all beings, was interested in the welfare of all, and viewed practice not as a simple self-improvement exercise, but as a public service. So there's a lot going on there, but I think it speaks to that in part. Well, the Buddha couldn't talk Shariputra into going to give well wishes to Vimalakirti. So he went through several of his other close disciples, 9 of them in this chapter. And they all had qualms. And they're all different kinds of concerns. I'll just read at least one other and perhaps 2 to give you a taste of it. So the Buddha approaches Subhuti, and the Buddha said to Subhuti, "You must go visit Vimalakirti and inquire about his illness." But Subhuti replied to the Buddha, "World-honored one, I am not competent to visit him and ask about his illness. Why? Because I recall how, in the past, I went to his house to beg alms. At that time, Vimalakirti took my begging bowl, filled it with things to eat, and said, 'Ah, Subhuti, if one can look on all foods as equal, that person can look on all things as equal. And if one looks on all things as equal, one will look on all foods as equal. If one begs alms in this manner, then one is worthy to receive food.'" Subhuti, if you can subscribe to erroneous views and thus never reach the other shore of enlightenment, if you can remain among the 8 difficulties, these are the opposites of the Eightfold Path. If you can remain among the 8 difficulties and never escape from difficulty, and can make common cause with earthly desires and remove yourself from a state of purity, if when you attain the samadhi of disputation, you allow all living beings to attain the same degree of concentration, if those who give you alms are not destined to gain good fortune thereby, and those who make offerings to you fall into the 3 evil paths of existence, if you are willing to join hands with the host of devils and make the defilements your companions, if you can be no different from all these devils and these dusts and defilements, if you can bear hatred toward all living beings, slander the Buddhas, vilify the Dharma, not be counted among the assembly of monks, and in the end never attain nirvana, if you can do all this, then you will be worthy to receive food. At that time, world-honored one, when I heard these words, I was dumbfounded. not knowing what sort of words they were or how to answer them. I put down my alms bowl, intending to leave the house, but then Vimalakirti said to me, "Ah, Subhuti, pick up your alms bowl and do not be afraid." Why do I say this? If some phantom person conjured up by the thus come one, by the Buddha, were to reprimand you as I have just done, you would not be afraid, would you? No, Subhuti replied. Vimalakirti said, all things in the phenomenal world are just such phantoms and conjured things, so you have no cause to feel afraid. Why? Because all words and pronouncements, too, are no different from these other phantom forms. When a person is wise, he does not cling to words, and hence is not afraid of them. Why? Because words are something apart from self-nature. Words do not really exist. And this is emancipation. All things of the phenomenal world bear this mark of emancipation. Well, when Vimalakirti expanded the law in this manner, 200 heavenly beings gained the purity of the Dharma eye. Therefore, I say, I am not competent to visit him and ask about his illness. So, this was a severe challenge to this monk who had been dedicated to purity, following the Buddha's teachings, a severe challenge in the form of words. And clearly it was intended as an exercise. And again, the Buddha is collaborating in this story, as the story goes, with Vimalakirti. So I must confess that Carol and I have been watching a serial regularly called The Bureau. And it's about these characters in the DGSI, which is it's a French serial, the French intelligence agency. And one of the regular occurrences is that the agency itself will test agents as they are being trained, and also later, after they've already become fully trained agents. They'll put them through tests, which can be very severe. They can stage these events where they're kidnapped and perhaps tortured in order to assure their allegiance. And if they pass these tests, it gives the agent supposedly greater confidence and greater allegiance. So I view this in part as this conversation with Subhuti as an event such as that, where Vimalakirti is testing Subhuti to see if he can be shaken by words. And when we are shaken by words, it's an interesting thing to investigate. To investigate what fabrication has been violated, what fabrication of ego, what fabrication of self or other has been stirred by the words, by the conversation, by the event. It's an interesting point of investigation. I think I will save the third reading about the third disciple until another time, in the interest of time. There is so much to wonder about in this quizzical work of the Vimalakirti Sutra. And in a sense, it's a play within a play. The sutra itself is a story, but it's telling a story about a constructed story with the Buddha and Vimalakirti being the writers and directors. To give instruction to these accomplished monks, and in sharing this instruction to help illuminate the Buddha's teachings for us. So one can ask, what is the lesson here? And one can also ask, does one approve of the means? The rather perhaps suspect means of Vimalakirti, which involve a certain level of deception. So I think I will stop there and invite any comments or reflections on this. I particularly would invite anyone who happens to be new today. I haven't seen all the people who are here, but if there are any people who are new and they want to tell us a little bit about themselves, please do so, or feel free not to if you prefer. After a few minutes, we will, as we did last time, break up into smaller groups before reconvening at the end. So thank you so much for listening.